guys, welcome back to a page in the chapter, or welcome if you're new here. My name is Paige and today we are talking through some romance recommendations. My shelves have changed, nobody panic, it is temporary. I needed a picture of my bookshelves and I didn't want all of the gaps, so I mixed genres and it's going back to being organized by genre because I think that gives me more longevity, so nobody panic about the way I've organized it. However, the fairy lutes facing out I might keep. I quite like that. But anyway, today we are talking through some romance recommendations for really popular romance tropes. This is kind of in line with my romantasy for beginners video. I think a lot of these are quite popular books. I think a lot of people will have read these, particularly if you love a trope. I don't think these are like deep cut books for that trope, but I think they are great examples of the trope, and this is a great way to find new tropes that you might be interested in, discover the romance genre a little bit more if you're new to it, and that is kind of the intended purpose of this video. And unlike my romantasy one where I was giving recommendations for beginners as a beginner, I have a lot more experience with contemporary romance. It is my baby. I adore contemporary romances. They bring me so much joy, and I'm so happy that it's no longer like considered weird to like contemporary romance. It's blown up so much on TikTok, it's kind of hard to imagine a time when it was like a little weird to be reading romance books, but I'm very happy that we've moved on from that, and because you know, as you can tell, I do love. I am a hopeless romantic at heart, and I just love watching people fall in love and get their happily ever afters, and I'm very happy to share some of my favorites with you. And trope wise, again, these are excellent. So if you guys like the sound of this video and you would like to see more from me, then do please feel free to hit that big red subscribe button down below and stay tuned for future content. I upload every single Wednesday and every single Sunday. Also do feel free to check me out on Bookstagram at Page in Chapter. I have fallen off the Bookstagram bandwagon a little bit, but I want to get back on it. It has been an issue of time. Also the fact that my office space is being redecorated by my landlord, so I do not get to be in here as much as I would like to be, which means I don't film as much as I would like to. Anyway, I'm clearly in a rambling mood today, so good luck editing me, and let's get on into the video, which I'm not sure what I'm going to call yet, but basically this is the best examples of popular romance tropes if you are looking to get into contemporary romance as a beginner. So the first trope we are going to be discussing is one of my personal favorites, and that is marriage of convenience. The crux of this trope is that we have two people who get married for a reason other than love. It's very similar to fake dating in terms of the conventions of the trope. We have two people who are often put into situations where they have to pretend to be in love, and that leads them into a lot of tension-filled moments. And one of my favorite things about this trope is when they fall into the lie a little bit and they're like, okay, so we're actually acting like we're married now. Is that because we've fallen for each other? Because I know I'm developing feelings, but are they just acting? It's that element of the trope that makes me love marriage of convenience so much. So my first recommendation for this, none of you will be surprised, I always say that this is one of the best examples of marriage of convenience in a contemporary space, and that is King of Wrath by Anna Huang. This is one of my favorite Anna books of all time, and this is definitely the best one in Kings of Sin series so far. I think people might disagree with me on this, but as a marriage of convenience girly, I have to say this is the best one. And it is very, very difficult to do marriage of convenience in a contemporary romance. I'm gonna lay this out there right now. I think marriage of convenience works a lot better in a romantasy setting because you can create a world where it makes sense for that to happen. In a contemporary space, it can be quite difficult to do marriage of convenience and come up with a plausible reason for why these people would get married rather than just date. There's not much difference between being married and dating at this point in our contemporary world, but this one does it really well by choosing very like high up socialite characters. The marriage of convenience works. So we have our main characters Dante and Vivian. Dante is a billionaire CEO, of course he is, and he has never planned to marry, but he's being blackmailed, so he is kind of forced to get engaged to someone he really doesn't want to be engaged to. And then Vivian is the daughter of Dante's enemy, and basically her family are social climbers. They are desperate to be seen in like better circles. I believe she's like new money, and they are being shunned by all of the old money people, and so they want a match with Dante Russo because he's so well respected as this billionaire CEO, and so she is kind of forced into this marriage with him to help out her family basically. And this is just a really good example of how fun this trope can be. The whiplash of acting like they're in love and then thinking like, oh my god, is something gonna happen in public, to like them being alone and it's like, nope, sorry, I hate you. It's so good. And this is a less than 400-page romance. You will fly through it, honestly. It's just so addictive. This is one of my favorite romances ever, let alone just Marriage of Convenience, so I think this is a great place to start. And then my next contemporary romance Marriage of Convenience recommendation is Terms and Conditions by Lauren Asher. This is book 2 in the Dreamland Billionaire series and is my favorite of the 3. The Dreamland Billionaire series has a structure to it that I think allows for this Marriage of Convenience in a contemporary setting, and I think Lauren Asher does a really good job of making it fit. So the basis of this series is that we have 3 brothers and their grandfather is this Walt Disney type figure, is the CEO or something, the founder of some Disney-esque company. And unfortunately, at the beginning of book 1, when he passes away, he leaves each brother with a thing they have to do in order to come into their inheritance. And in book 1, we see Rowan as he is forced to go to this Disneyland, it's called Dreamland, and help run it, and that is a kind of Grumpy Sunshine vibe. And in this book we follow Declan as he has been told that if he wants to inherit his share of the company, he needs to get married and have a baby. And whilst it's kind of ludicrous, I think Lauren Asher, she leans into the silliness of it a little bit, but also Declan as a character. His character development in this is excellent, which really lends itself to this trope because he is so mean and out of touch, and you can kind of see how he would not be the type of person you would want running a Disney-esque company about children and joy. And so he is told that he needs to get married and have a child in the essence of like loosening him up, bringing him some happiness, getting him to see like how children exist and the joy they can bring and things like that. And I think it kind of makes sense, at least in a way that you can read the story without constantly feeling like this is so stupid kind of thing. So essentially Declan ends up marrying his assistant, who they've always had kind of like a working friendship, and she's just there to offer a hand. They set rules for how this whole fake marriage baby thing is gonna work, but then the lines start to blur and it is the best thing ever. I think Declan and Iris are just one of my favorite romance couples. They are so fun to read and I really enjoyed seeing them handle everything that gets thrown at them. And this is just one of my favorites in terms of Marriage of Convenience because, as I said, I think Lauren Asher leans into the silliness of the trope in a perfect way. And so if you're looking for a place to start with Marriage of Conveniences, I also think this is a great option. So the next trope I would like to talk to you about is probably my least favorite, but it's such a staple that it does warrant being discussed, and that is friends to lovers. So the main element of this trope is kind of in the title. It is following the relationship development of people who are friends and watching them become lovers. I don't really like this because I find I think if you're one for a lot of mutual pining, this is a trope that you might like. What I personally am not a fan of with this trope is that I think oftentimes it is like the reason for why they're not together is we don't want to ruin the friendship, even though the minute you start feeling like you're in love with them, your friendship's essentially ruined. It's just like a ticking time bomb, really. And it also feels very emotionally cheaty for me, because they'll often be in other relationships still pining after their best friends, and I really don't like that element. But that being said, there are books that don't do this. There have been friends to lovers books that I have liked, and I will be sharing those with you now. No trope is 100% bad. There are plenty of tropes that I would say I don't typically like, that I have read great examples of, and this is just about everybody's preference. So the first friends to lovers book that I need to talk to you about is Powerless by Elsie Silver. This is book 3, I want to say, in the Chestnut Spring series. The entire Chestnut Spring series is absolutely excellent, and each one does have a different trope in it. So to be honest, if you want to explore more romance tropes, then you could just pick up each book in the Chestnut Spring series, see which ones you like. And the Chestnut Spring series also takes off an added trope convention of being a small town romance, and small town romances are their own umbrella of things where it takes place in a small town. You usually have a fun cast of characters, you normally have interconnecting standalones, and I think everybody can agree that the Chestnut Spring series is probably the best small town romance on the market right now. It's so good, and this third book is a great example of friends to lovers. So we follow Sloane, who is a ballerina, and Jasper, who is a NHL player, and they have been childhood friends. They grew up together, they were really close growing up, but they kind of always felt like there could be more. I know Sloane has always had a big crush on Jasper, but it never really went any further, and the reason for why here does become uncovered throughout the book, and it is much better than just, I don't want to ruin the friendship. But we follow Sloane at the beginning of this book as she is about to get married to a man she doesn't really love, and she essentially, Sloane runs away from her wedding with Jasper to help her, because he has always been there for her, and as soon as she realizes that this is a bad idea and not something she wants to go through with, they are off and out the door, and it is amazing. So these two are kind of spending a lot more time together now as Sloane is needing that support. Jasper also goes through something that he needs support for, and as they are leaning on each other in this difficult time, they kind of realize that there is more here, and they really work on it, and we see this wonderful relationship bloom. What I like about this is the reason for why they haven't been together, and I like the way they get together, because another question I often have with friends to lovers is why now? Like, if you've known this person for so many years, like, why now, in the moment that we are following in this book, do you suddenly realize and make it a thing? And I think it makes sense in this book because they are both going through such difficult times and having to lean on each other for support, that they would then realize there is more to this relationship than friendship, or want to seek comfort in each other in a different way and thus realize there is a spark there. I think that makes so much sense, and I love this book for that. So if you like ice hockey romances and you also want to try a friends to lovers, then this is your gal. And then we come back to the Dreamland Billionaire series for Final Offer. I'm now realizing that I think every single one of these books has made it into this video. They're just great examples of their tropes, okay? I really like the Dreamland Billionaire series. So in this book, we follow our main characters, Callahan and Alana. Essentially, they grew up together, were best friends at this like lake house, and he absolutely destroys their friendship in like the past of this book, and he really hurts Alana in the process. His task that he has been given in order to claim his inheritance is to go back to this lake house for the first time in 6 years and try to sell it. Only when he gets there, he discovers that Alana is living there, and so these two are forced to spend a lot of time together. If Callahan wants to claim his inheritance, then he needs to sell this house, but he also doesn't want to throw his long-term best friend out on the street, and he knows how badly he hurt her in the past. And again, what is excellent about this is just character development, and the why now makes sense again in this book because of the character development and the way Callahan has to confront a lot of things that he has faced and traumas he has faced. This is quite long for a romance, and one of my criticisms of this book is that it is too long, but it is an excellent version of friends to lovers, and this doesn't have the emotional cheating element. It has a great reason for why these two weren't together why they weren't able to get beyond that barrier of friendship. And it's almost like it's a friends to lovers, but it also has a second chance romance element to it, because Callahan has hurt her in the past, and he is now having to grovel and really make it up to her. So there's a lot of different elements of this book, which is why it is probably so long. And whilst it's not my favorite in the Dreamland Billionaire series, it probably wouldn't have ever been, because friends to lovers is not a trope that I typically gravitate towards. There was so much else in this book that made it good, and I also think objectively this is a good example of friends to lovers, so I'm going to tell you about it here. So the next trope I'm going to talk to you about is a huge fan favourite, and that is enemies to lovers. Now again, conventions of this trope are quite self-explanatory. You have two people who can't stand each other, who are forced to spend time together or forced to work towards a common goal, and in the process of this realize that there is a fine line between love and hate, and all that hatred has actually built up into the best kind of tension between them, and there actually is a spark there that they've been ignoring because they dislike each other so much. And this is another one that I have to add a little caveat, a little asterisk on. Doesn't work incredibly well in contemporary romance. It's a lot easier to believe that people hate each other in a fantasy setting, because can you really have an enemy, like a true enemy, in a contemporary setting? And especially because you have to balance the fact that one of these characters can't have done something so heinous that they can never move past it, or it makes them a really bad person. Like, you have to balance the believability of them falling in love and being able to move past their hatred with the fact that they need to hate each other in a contemporary setting. But I do think there are contemporary romance books that do this well. It might not be quite as intense as enemies to lovers in a fantasy setting goes, but my threshold for this is kind of, is it believable that these two characters really don't like each other? Do they have a good reason for not liking each other and for maintaining that dislike of each other for an extended period of time? And for me, that would make it a pretty decent example of enemies. So the first option I'm giving you here, I don't own a physical copy of, but I think of this book very warmly, very happily. I read it in like the depths of one of the worst reading slumps I've ever had in my entire life, and this was the only book I finished in about 6 months, and that is The Unhoneymooners by Christina Lauren. I don't love the Christina Lauren duo. There's not many books by them that I have enjoyed, but The Unhoneymooners comes out on top in every way. This is such a fun book. So essentially this book starts off with our main character being at a wedding, and I believe it's like her sister's wedding or something like that, and her and the best man hate each other. They really do not get along. It is just constant like dislike, nitpicking at each other. Like, it's not good. But when everyone at this wedding comes down with food poisoning, our main character's sister begs her to go on this honeymoon in her place because it's non-refundable. I think they won it, or they did it on like a coupon or something, so they can't exchange it, they can't refund it, they can't move it. So she begs our main character and the best man to go and pretend to be the wedding couple, to be the bride and groom on this honeymoon. And they both take it because it's a free luxury holiday, why would you not? And it kind of plays into this fake dating vibe too, where when they're in public or around hotel staff, they kind of have to act like they have been recently married so that they don't get found out that they're there like fraudulently. And this one is just very, very light-hearted and fun. I actually think I'm due for a reread of this year. It's definitely one of those fun contemporary romance books that you would take on holiday and read by the pool and just have an excellent time with. And I think the enemies aspect of this is really fun. And I believe I gave this 5 stars, 4 or 5 stars back when I read it a couple years ago. And normally I find enemies to lovers in a contemporary setting a little bit annoying, and I don't always rate it that highly. So the fact that I did rate it highly means that the enemies to lovers was done really well. And then my next enemies to lovers suggestion is one of my all-time favorites, and that is Beach Read by Emily Henry. The enemies in this, you know, they dislike each other. They don't get along. They have a history that means they don't get along. Enemies might be a stretch, but I'm going to talk about it in this category anyway because I do think this is an excellent example of how characters can go from disliking each other to feeling like there's something more. So we follow two authors, January and Gus, and January is like a hopeless romantic romance writer. Gus is like a very literary type of character, kind of on the road to write the next great American novel kind of thing, and they knew each other in college and they do not like each other now, but they find themselves like staying next door to each other at this this lake house or something like that. They end up being near each other on holiday, and so they decide that they will write each other's genre or write each other's book to try to get out of the writing slumps that they are in, to get past their writer's block, to try something different. And this forces them to confront a lot of things that they don't want to face. It forces them to confront a lot of emotions that have played into their writing and into their hatred of each other for a long time. And the best thing about Emily Henry romances for me, and why I will always go back to her books, even if I don't like them that much, I will still keep trying the next one, because what Emily Henry does excellently is character development and character growth. There is always a lot more to her romances than just romance. I think she has a very clever blend of romance writing and literary fiction writing, which is very interesting that this is her debut novel, because she does have this very characters with deep pasts learning to get over that, and how the romance helps them do that, and how the romance feeds into their confrontation of the traumas they've gone through. I think that is something Emily Henry does excellently. And again, this is another really fun summary enemies to lovers read. I will probably be rereading this one this year as well. Every time I do videos like this, my reread pile gets so long because I talk myself into wanting to reread them when I tell you guys about them. But this is one of my all-time favorite romances. I know some people don't like this, but I love it, and I do think this is a good one to try for characters that don't like each other progressing to a point of having feelings for each other, just because of the added element of the character development and the confronting old traumas and things. I think having someone you hate who isn't concerned about hurting your feelings around you would probably force you to confront a lot of those things, and thus you would get past them. I don't know if I'm making any sense, but I love this book and I think you should read it. Next we have my all-time favorite trope, and that is fake dating. So I class this under the same umbrella as Marriage of Convenience, and I would say like these two together are my favorite tropes because they are very similar to each other. I would say fake dating just tends to work a little bit better in contemporary romance because you have more reasons to pretend to date someone than you would to marry somebody. But the essence of fake dating is two people who are in situations they want resolving, and they believe that being seen as someone in a relationship or having a partner will help them navigate the situations that they're in, and so they decide to enter into a mutual agreement of pretending to date each other in public but not really dating in private. And again, this is an excellent one for when the lines start to blur and they don't know if it's real or not anymore, and they're starting to fall but they don't know if the other one is, and they don't want to say anything in case they look like an idiot because they've always sworn that this was just pretend, but now it's not feeling pretend anymore. The tension in this trope is excellent and I love it. So I would be a terrible romance booktuber if I did not talk about these books when I talked about fake dating, and that is The Love Hypothesis and Love Theoretically by Ali Hazelwood. Ali Hazelwood gets a lot of shit, okay, but I love her books. There have been a couple that haven't been a hit, but she's always pulled it back, and I love her books. The Love Hypothesis is one of my favorites. It feels so cozy. Like, you know when you have those old rereads that just put you in a good mood no matter what is going on? The Love Hypothesis is like that for me. I wish I could read this for the first time over again. And then Love Theoretically is another fake dating that Ali Hazelwood has done, but this one is a very interesting version of fake dating. So in The Love Hypothesis, we follow our main characters Olive and Adam, and Olive is a biology PhD student and Adam is a well-respected professor at this university where Olive is doing her PhD. And essentially Olive wants to convince her friends that she is over her ex because her friend has a spark with her ex, and Olive never really felt that way about him. She never felt she wasn't that into him, and she wants her friend to go for it. So she tries to convince her friend that she has moved on and she's not interested anymore, so her friend will enter into this relationship. And in doing so, she kind of panics, and when her friend comes like to see her, she just grabs the nearest guy and she kisses him, and that happens to be Adam. And Adam enters into this because he needs the university where he works at to believe that he is like grounded and has roots in this place, so that they don't think he is trying to leave and like fire him and blah blah blah. It's a little bit unhinged. Some people really don't think that the reason for these two entering into a fake dating situation is believable. I can kind of see it, but also I am very capable of having like suspension of disbelief when I'm reading, and I think it very much makes sense for the university setting that Ali Hazelwood has built. So I can get beyond the fact that him dating a student probably wouldn't go over very well in a real world university setting. But this is such a fun romance, and again it does the lines are blurring, and I don't know how you feel, but I know how I feel. Like, oh, it does it very well. And also because of the academic setting, there's a lot that goes into this book, and a lot of like messaging in this book about women in STEM and the experiences they face that Ali Hazelwood touches on, that I think adds another element to this book that makes the fake dating and the romance that much more interesting. And I remember reading this and then just wanting as many academic setting romances as I could get my hands on, because this is done so well and is so addictive. So I really recommend this one. And then Love Theoretically is a very interesting fake dating in that essentially the fake dating doesn't happen between our main characters. So we follow our main character Elsie, and she is a fake date. Like, she is signed up to this website where people can hire her to be their fake date for events, or like she will be their fake girlfriend for events. And then one day she is invited to be a fake date at this like family party. Elsie does this fake dating search because she is an adjunct professor. She's not earning a lot of money. She's really struggling to get by. She needs this gig to kind of supplement her earnings, but she is a very serious woman in STEM and she wants to continue on that trajectory. And then one of her favorite clients hires her again for this family thing, only she realizes that a man that she works with and has a professional relationship with, but it is a professional relationship where she really doesn't like him because she blames him for the downfall of the career of her mentor. She finds out that he is the older brother of one of her favorite clients. So it does have the fake dating, but in a really different way, because we have Elsie and Jack growing closer, and then Jack, because he doesn't know that it's a fake relationship between Elsie and his brother, obviously doesn't want to take that step and betray his brother in that way, and Elsie doesn't want to tell him that it's only a fake dating situation because she doesn't want to betray the trust of her client. So it's a really interesting dynamic that the whole like fake dating brings to this. It is not a stereotypical fake dating romance, but I still think it's interesting to recommend this one so you can see how the different ways like faking it can be brought in and the different tension that can bring, and maybe you'll just prefer this to a book standard fake dating trope. And then next we have another one of my all-time favorites, which is Hopeless by Elsie Silver, another Chestnut Springs series book. This is the last book in the series, and this takes it a step forward because they are fake fiance. They are fake engaged. So in this book we follow Beau, who is a military hero. He's being forced to face life where he's no longer in the military. He doesn't really know what to do with himself. Everybody is getting really worried about him, and so to get them off his back, he decides to pretend that he is in this relationship and engaged to our main character, Bailey. And Bailey is a bartender. She is massively looked down on by this town because her family are not very nice people. She has always been really nice and really good, and she's mentioned in other books as being like the best member of her family, but everybody looks down on her. So she decides to enter into this fake relationship with Beau so that people will get off her back a little bit more. She can like save up and have a bit more respect from people and then be able to move away from this town. And I loved these two. I think this is also an age gap romance, but it's done really well. And we've got two people with very valid reasons for wanting to enter into this situation. And I think because it's small town, you can buy the fake engagement story a little bit more. And Beau is one of my favorite Eton men. Anyway, this one is excellent. I love the fiance element. I think it's, again, just a little something different. It's not just fake dating. The stakes are a little bit higher, but it's not as intense as Marriage of Convenience. It's like a perfect middle ground, and I love it. And then the final category, the final trope that I have to share with you is, it's kind of a trope. This is probably the broadest of the tropes that I'm going to share with you, and that is forced proximity. Conventions of this trope, the crux of this trope, is that you have two characters who for some reason are forced to spend a lot of time together. And this one is broader because it works very well with other tropes. Like for example, fake dating and Marriage of Convenience would also be forced proximity because they're trying to fake a relationship, so they're forced to spend time together. So I guess essentially this is a miscellaneous category for me where I can just talk about some books that I love that happen to have forced proximity in them. And what I like about this trope is the fact that because it's forced, they often don't really want to be spending this much time with this person, or there's some hesitation there, or they don't really get along a lot of the time. And I think it adds for a really interesting dynamic that they have to spend time together, and at some point there becomes this turning point of like, okay, I trust you, or okay, we do need to start working together now, or okay, we have this like common goal, like maybe we can start to get along. Like there's always a moment or a turning point, and I always think it's so enjoyable in forced proximity. So the first book I'm going to talk to you about in this category is Twisted Games by my lord and saviour Anna Huang. This is book 2 in the Twisted series. This is also my favourite book in the Twisted series because it is a smutty Princess Diaries 2 retelling, essentially. And this is forced proximity because we follow our main character Bridget, and she is a princess to a small like European royal nation, and she gets a new bodyguard because her long-term bodyguard that she has a great working relationship with is going on paternity leave. Enter Reese Larson, who basically switches her whole world upside down. He is not willing to let her have the freedom she has experienced under her last bodyguard, and they really get off on the wrong foot because of this, but they are forced to be around each other. He is her bodyguard, he is there to protect her, there is nothing she can do about it, and this puts them into a lot of situations, and it's just a really fun one to see them get off on this wrong foot and really not like each other, but be constantly forced to be around each other because of the nature of his job to her and his job in relation to her, and getting to see their relationship progress as Bridget's life just gets turned upside down over the course of this book, and he ends up becoming like something for her to lean on, like the one constant in her life when she's going through all of this change. And this book is set over quite a long period of time, and it's very easy to see how this relationship has developed, and even in the beginning it is made clear that there is like that attraction to each other, that spark is there, but she just cannot get past how much he is upending her life in the beginning. But this is such a fun forced proximity, and yeah, just I feel like all I need to say to sell you on this book is smutty Princess Diaries retelling. So I have realized that all of these books are forced in a kind of work-related way. Clearly I just really like that in a trope. But my next recommendation is one that, if there's any series recommendation you take from this video, it should be this series. This is the third book and my favourite book in the series, but read them all and read them in order. And that is Caught Up by Liz Tomford, book 3 in the Windy City series. So this does two tropes very well. This is forced proximity in that our main character Miller is working for our male love interest Kai, but it's also the trope of being a single dad romance. So Kai is a baseball player and he has a very young son, and he is so protective of his son that he has like fired every single nanny, and it's just not going well and it's starting to impact his career. So his manager, his coach, I don't know, whoever it is, decides that his daughter Miller will be the nanny for Kai and his child, so that Kai can't fire her. And so these two are forced to spend time together because Miller is involved in Kai's son's life and they spend time together. And this is a romance novel that made me cry like a baby. It is so heartfelt and heartwarming. What these characters go through, particularly Miller as a character, I felt so much for her, and I think Liz Tomford does that excellently in her romances. Like, her characters have so much depth that it is impossible to not feel everything they feel right along with them. And Miller and Kai are like my favorite couple, and I just loved everything about this book, and I just want to rave about it for a little bit. Like, I wouldn't even say the forced proximity is the biggest aspect of this book. The single dad romance is the bigger aspect, but they are forced to spend time together in that Miller is now on the road with Kai because she's helping to take care of his son when he is training and at games, and Miller gets the added bonus of getting to spend time with her dad during the season because he's also normally traveling with the team, so they don't spend a lot of time together. And so yeah, they are like forced to spend time together. And Kai isn't a huge fan of Miller. He looks down on Miller quite a bit in the beginning. He is just so protective of his son that no one is ever really going to meet his high standards, and he doesn't look at Miller and think that is a responsible woman who should be taking care of my child. But through this like forced proximity of him being forced to hire her and have her around, and her not really being able to quit and him not being able to fire her, it just works so excellently. And yeah, there is nothing more I can say about this book other than it has my whole entire heart, and I will preach about this series until the world is listening, because like just the feels that this can evoke in me is unlike any other romance series I've ever read. So please go and read it. And then the next book is another like new favorite, and I vlogged this one and you guys know I love this one. And again, it has other tropes that it probably does more, but it is forced proximity, and that is Fangirl Down by Tessa Bailey. This is a sports romance and it is a golf romance, and what I really like about this book particularly is that you cannot have this book without the golf element. Our main character Wells is not just a golfer and then they have a relationship outside of golf. Like, the sport is so intrinsic to this plotline, and I love that about it. But this is forced proximity in that we have our main character Wells, and he is a down on his luck golfer. He was once great and now he is not earning anything on the PGA Tour. He is constantly losing. He has such a bad rap, and Josephine is his biggest fan and continues to show up for him day in and day out. Every single game she shows up and she supports him. And then Wells quits and he takes his frustrations out on Josephine, who is just trying to support him. And then he feels so bad about it, and stuff in the real world happens that makes him feel even more bad about it. So instead, he, to atone for this guilt, invites Josephine to work for him and be his caddy. And essentially a caddy is a person who knows so much about golf and has such a good relationship with the golfer that they work for that they will know what club to advise them to use for each hole, because they know the distances they can hit with each club and they know their style of golf, how they like to play, what's going to work best for them basically, and they just know so much about golf. And then the caddy will earn a cut of the winnings. So this is a mutually beneficial relationship. If Josephine can do her job well enough to get Wells back into a winning position so he earns money, then she will get a cut out of it. And they are forced to spend a lot of time together because they're forced to spend that time together on the golf course. And Wells is a very emotionally unavailable character. But I think what is excellent about this is that because he's hired Josephine, he's forced to trust her on the golf course. He's forced to take her word for it and go with what she says on the golf course. And I think that has really interesting dynamics for outside of the golf course, because if he can trust her, if he's starting to learn he can trust her on the golf course, and that's going to feed into their relationship outside of work. And then because they're traveling together, because it's the PGA Tour, they're staying together, they're going to dinners together, they're socializing together, they are just together all of the time because they are working in this very intense environment. And this is excellent. I would also say that this is a Grumpy Sunshine. I did originally have this in a Grumpy Sunshine category. Maybe we'll delve into Grumpy Sunshines in a different video with this same idea, but I then just decided to move this to Forced Proximity because I think it fits just as excellently for that. So this is one of my favorite sports romances. I own multiple copies of this book. I think it is truly excellent, and I know the golf would probably put a lot of people off, but trust me, it's really, really good. And I would like to see more golf romances, honestly, because this has set a standard now. And so those are just a handful of popular contemporary romance tropes and some of my favorites and the books that I would recommend for them. There is definitely more tropes that we could delve into in future videos, definitely more recommendations I could give even for these tropes. I tried to keep it as short as I possibly could, and as I said in the beginning, I know some of these are going to be really popular books that you have already heard of. This is not supposed to be a deep cuts video. This is just supposed to be an introduction to a lot of really popular tropes and great examples of them. And I hope that you enjoyed it, and I hope you took something away from this video, even if you are a massive romance reader. Hopefully there were still some recommendations in here that you could take away and that this was enjoyable for you in some way. So if you did enjoy this video and you would like to see more from me, then do please feel free to hit that big red subscribe button down below and stay tuned for future videos. Also, do let me know your thoughts on any of these books, what your favorite romance tropes are and your favorite examples of them. I am always looking for more recommendations, and it would be so fun to talk to you guys about it. I feel like I have been chatting away for a while now, so without further ado, I hope you guys are having a fantastic week, you're enjoying everything you are reading, and there are no reading slumps in your future, and I will see you for my next video. Bye guys.